Hello, everyone. So, today I am going to be trying to explain the fourth dimension. Alright, so what is the fourth dimension? So, we have, one dimension, a straight line back and forth. Second dimension, a plane where you can go all x and y. And the third dimension, which is right here, back, forth, w, y, z. Now, to imagine the fourth dimension, you would have to imagine a plane separate from this. It would be totally invisible to us since another plane beyond ours would be totally like beyond our viewpoints. So you would have X, Y, Z, and then maybe you would name this fourth plane, this fourth direction, T or W. I say T because it could also mean time, because if you think about it, our third dimension has a line through it, and that is time. You can go through time, but of course, stuck in our third dimension, you cannot go back or forth through time. You can only stay in the present. That's where the fourth dimension comes in. Well, theorized. There are also many ways to visually, think about the fourth dimension. Like you could mathematically or you can mathematically look at a hypercube, which is basically a cube inside of a cube with, it's basically like the third dimensional cube is inside of this fourth dimensional, hypercube. To make it even more complicated, you would imagine that a fourth dimensional, hypercube would have 8 three-dimensional cubes as its like corners. To make sense of that, a square has 4 lines as its borders. A cube has 6 squares as its borders. So, speaking from what we learn, a fourth dimensional object would have, or a fourth dimensional cube would have, 8 cubes as its border. So there's a lot more things you can understand about the fourth dimension. One I came up earlier is that if you imagine like a circle, or no, a sphere, and a second dimensional creature on that sphere, starting from any position, if they were to go in a straight line, they would end up in the same place. Now, if you think about the third dimension in a fourth dimensional sphere, you could imagine that you could start from any point in this fourth dimensional sphere as a third dimensional creature, and you would just go straight, and this would inevitably lead you back to the same position. To make things a little bit more interesting, we could look at black holes. Now, this is totally a theory I made up, and none of this has been proven yet, but if you push matter so hard that it just bends out of, the third plane and just goes into the fourth dimension, you would have, like, pretty much infinite time. As you know, the fourth dimension is, in fact, all time at once. A fourth dimensional creature would not experience time like as the present. It would experience the end of time and the beginning of the time, all in one singular moment, one singular consciousness that observes all time at the same time. The only thing that is preventing it from, being in prison is that it is one timeline. There is no separate timelines. That's where you get into stuff like the fifth dimension, where there are, other timelines. So, going back to the black hole, if you were to push matter beyond the third dimension, the only direction that it would go in would be the fourth, and that would make it infinitely, it would break a lot of things, as you would expect. Black holes tend to warp time. It's like you would experience the end of time in a black hole, even though you're only experience a very, very short amount of time. You would see the end of the universe as you sink into a black hole being particles pushed beyond the third dimension, because the boundary of the third dimension, speaking from what I can say, would be the Planck distance. And if you were to push something beyond the Planck distance, you would perhaps travel into the fourth dimension, bending time itself. Now, how does relativity bend or intertwine with this? I do not know, because that might just be for a different thing, and I might not be well knowledgeable enough to understand relativity at the current time. But you would see how the fourth dimension has a lot of properties that we can learn from, and in fact, it could very well be an abstract concept that could very well make us understand our reality a little bit more than what we currently know. It's amazing how, human beings are able to process all these facts in their abstract minds. It's like we are given this awareness that shouldn't be possible, aware of that we can even ask these types of questions.